Welcome in. My name is CJ. I am a co-organizer here at DenverScript, along with Marlena in the back, and also Will over here, and also Chad, or Cheddar, back there. Cool. So throughout the meetup, if you have any questions, concerns, or anything like that, you could reach out to one of us. I'm going to review the code of conduct right quick. I'm going to give the high-level bullet points. And then if you want the full thing, denverscript.com/code-of-conduct. So DenverScript is dedicated to providing a harassment-free community for everyone. Participants violating these rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the community at the discretion of the DenverScript organizers. If you are being harassed, notice that someone else is being harassed, or have any other concerns, please contact a DenverScript organizer immediately. So you saw who we were. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can send an email, denverscript@gmail.com. We'll take care of it. So basic ground rules: be kind, don't talk over the organizers or the speakers. We will have specific times for Q&A. We'll also have specific times for networking, so that's when the talking should happen. And when we do Q&A, make sure you ask constructive questions. We don't like questions that try to put the speaker in their place or anything like that. So just be kind, and we'll have a good time. We're currently live right now, so on YouTube at DenverScript Meetup. And with that in mind, if you do ask a question, wait for the microphone so that the live stream can hear you. And big thanks to our sponsors. So the space that you're in right now is called Code Talent. They are a talent agency. So if you are a company looking to hire people, you can reach out to them. Or if you are someone looking for a job right now, you can reach out to them as well. They're really great. Their space is awesome. We appreciate them a ton. So definitely reach out to them if you have any needs like that. The food tonight is brought to you by jam.dev. And I'm going to play this video because I don't know that much about them. I know that they are a bug reporting tool, but this video is going to do a much better job of explaining what they do. And we appreciate them for providing the pizza. So here we go. Or not. That's not working. We're gonna pivot. If you check out jam.dev, you can watch that video. It's a 60-second video. Please go watch it because we appreciate them. But it's essentially one-click bug reports. So if you have bugs in your software, which you probably do, you need some way of reporting that, you can use jam.dev and get nice bug reports from your users with screenshots and annotations and comments and a full event log of what happened when that specific bug occurred. So definitely check out jam.dev. All right. We are always looking for other sponsors and speakers. So if you would like to sponsor the meetup, you can reach out denverscript@gmail.com. If you would like to speak, check out denverscript.com, and I'll show it to you right now because I'm going to show you the news, and it's here as well. So denverscript.com, it's got all the stuff. It's got our code of conduct. It's got our organizers page. You can check out the meetup.com page, check out our YouTube channel, or if you want to submit a talk, the link is right here. It is a Google form where you can submit. And let's get into the news. So on denverscript.com, click on JS News. There's a sidebar here. Today we're going to be covering the news for May 2024. So let's get into it. First up, React 19 is now in beta. So you can check out this blog post where they talk about some of the newer features. One of them specifically is use action state. So who here writes React code? Cool. You probably, you probably have read about this stuff, but if not, you probably might have some code that looks like this. You have a bunch of state variables, maybe like a submit handler. Maybe you're manually managing whether or not the pending state here. There is a new thing in React 19 called use transition, which helps with defining your pending state. So instead of having like a separate pending variable, you can do use transition, say start transition, that will set is pending to true, and then when this function completes, is pending will be set to false. So that's pretty slick. It's kind of getting into the realm of like React query with like less code, and even more so, they also introduced use action state, which is also somewhat sort of similar to what you might get with React query. With a single hook, you can get back error state, your submit handler, your pending variable. And so basically, your old code that had like all those state variables and stuff like that can kind of be combined into a single use action state. And you can start using this. I believe you already were able to use this in Next.js, but it's finally in beta here in React. So that's cool. Also, who experienced JS Deliver going down on May 2nd? Anybody remember that happening? It happened. So there, you can check out this blog post that is a postmortem. So it talks about what happened and why it happened. But maybe you didn't know it was that JS Deliver was down, but a lot of websites broke because websites were hot linking to like let's say jQuery or various other libraries on JS Deliver, and because that entire CDN went down, a lot of sites on the web went down as well. So this is a fun article that kind of dives into why it happened. Svelte 5 RC is out. So this was news end of last month, it's roughly a month ago, but still cool stuff. You can check out this article that talks about it. Also check out the video by Rich Harris. But the big thing in Svelte 5 are runes. They've essentially revamped how you define your reactive code in Svelte. So that's exciting. Also, Solid Start version 1 is out. Who here has used or heard of Solid.js? A few of us, yeah. So Solid.js is pretty slick. Is it just solidjs.com? But it's been around for a few years, but it's definitely getting more press these days because it's a front-end framework that looks very similar to React. If you just like glanced at this code, you'd be like, yeah, that's React, but it's not because it has these little things called create signal, and it also has fine-grained reactivity. So this component doesn't re-render over and over again like it would in React. Essentially, only the places that are using the state variables will get updated, and there is no virtual DOM. Everything gets compiled into vanilla JavaScript. So that's Solid.js. Solid Start is a meta framework built on top of it. So it's equivalent to like Next.js or Nuxt or SvelteKit. And so this just reached version 1.0. And it's essentially the authors of Solid Start signaling that you can start to use this in production and you won't have to expect any breaking changes or anything like that. Let's see what else. Who heard about the React compiler announcement? Yeah. So this got announced at ReactConf. And I believe it's experimental. It's not even alpha yet. But the idea here is there will come a time when you can run your React code through the compiler and it will automatically optimize it. It'll automatically add use memos or use callback wherever it needs to. And that's pretty slick because you don't have to do manual optimization anymore. And also React.memo, it'll memoize your components as well automatically. So that's pretty slick. Some other big news, Remix and React Router are merging. So React Router was always a project from the same people that created Remix. Remix is another meta framework very similar to Next.js. And essentially, they were maintaining two libraries, and a lot of the things that Remix needed, they would basically implement it in React Router. And so a lot of this stuff has been extracted slowly, now to the point where they're just saying it's just going to be React Router now. So if you use React Router, you can start to get the benefits of Remix and get to a point where if you have an app that's already using React Router, you could potentially turn it into something that is similar to Next.js, but you don't have to rewrite the whole thing because you're already using React Router, which is pretty cool. Let's not forget about Angular. Version 18 of Angular was released just 6 days ago. I'll be honest, I don't know that much about it, but one thing I do know is now if you go to angular.io, that redirects to angular.dev. So that's a thing. And there's some other updates in here as well, including server-side rendering improvements. Yeah, and Next.js 15 RC is available. So a few more features around caching and other various experimental things that people are probably going to use in production anyways. I'm running low on time. Check out these articles I have linked here. They're pretty fun. And I'll spend a second talking about this because this was cool. I had only recently came across it. It is called Bulletproof React. And it is a Git repo that walks through patterns for working in React apps. So it is a simple, scalable, and powerful architecture for building production-ready React apps. This is something I've wanted to see for a very long time. This is my break timer. Let's take a quick stretch. So if you check out this repo, it basically runs through how to set up a complex application. And so you've probably tried to figure these things out on your own, like working in larger code bases and stuff like that. And this repo kind of breaks that stuff down and gives you some guides and things to go by when you're working on your own libraries. I found some interesting libraries here. Check those out. If you missed ReactConf, both day 1 and day 2 are up on YouTube, so check those out. And here are some upcoming conferences. So Denver Dev Day is happening Friday. It's on Friday. So if you hadn't heard of that, check it out. Frontend Nation is an online conference that's happening June 4th through 7th. Render Atlanta is happening in June. Anyone going to Render Atlanta? I'm not. I wish I was, but I'm not. JS Nation is happening in November in New York City. Also React Summit. Those two conferences are kind of like, they happen one after the other. So you can typically buy a joint ticket. And then the North American Information Security Summit is here in Denver on June 16th through 18th. And also React Advanced is happening October 25th through 28th. So if you would like to give conference talks or submit conference talks, GS Nation, React Summit, and React Advanced all have their CFPs, their call for papers, open right now. But you could potentially get a free trip to this conference if you submit a talk and get it accepted. All right, that's all the news I have. Does anyone have any news that I didn't mention that you would like to share with us? It could be anything. JavaScript news, general dev news, something exciting that happened in your life. No. Cool. And then let's just do a quick who is looking for a job? Raise a hand. Okay. And isn't anyone hiring? And if you are and you didn't raise your hand, that's okay too, because I mean it's very unevenly balanced there, and I completely understand. But great. Let's keep on moving. Your first talk is going to happen. So let's take a quick 5-minute break, grab some food, grab some drinks. We're going to get set up. Talk will start in about 1 minute 30 seconds. 1 minute 30 seconds. Finish your conversations, take your seats. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to take your seats. Alrighty, everyone. All right. Please finish up your conversations, because here we go. So your next speaker is Brenden Ehlers. And Brenden Ehlers is a backend developer out of Denver that has experience working with React and TypeScript. He spends much of his time reading and learning about new backend technologies and how they're used to transform the backend environment. He loves being active and drinking coffee. So the talk he's giving today is called When You Shouldn't Use Else Most of the Time. So when learning how to program, we're taught early on that the if-else control flow mechanism is essential to writing software. But in his professional experience, you rarely need to write else. Instead, rely on other methods of controlling the flow of the program. In this talk, he'll elaborate on what he thinks is the best way to handle control flow, being guard clauses, and some of the exceptions to the rule. Please give it up for Brenden Ehlers.
Hello. Does this sound good? Cool. So thanks for the introduction, CJ. I am Brenden Ehlers, and I will be giving my talk on why you shouldn't use else statements. Most of the time. So who am I? CJ gave a great introduction, but yeah, I'm a backend developer that also branches into the front end every now and again. I just like talking about code and the ways that we can work with code and how we can make our coding lives better. So I think the best way to do this is to start with an example. So something we're all familiar with is writing a function to create a user in a database, right? So you might have something like this where you have a function, create user, you have a database object, and a user that you want to pass in. And so you'll add something like return db.createUser. Let's just assume for the sake of example that this all works. There's no bugs or anything like that in this. So let's say you also have the requirement to ensure that the user is not null. And if you do get a null user, you want to throw an error. So we change the code like this. Check if the user is not null, and otherwise throw an error. So pretty simple, pretty easy to parse and everything like that. But let's say there's another requirement. Let's say you have to check the database is connected. So you add another condition, database.isConnected, and otherwise you throw an error. Oh, and you just heard that there's another condition. You have to make sure that the user is unique. So you add another condition. And suddenly your entire function is kind of this massive indentation and throwing errors, and you're not really sure where the control flow is. So how can we fix this? Well, I like to claim that guard clauses are the solution. So guard clauses are just checks on variables that end the function execution when the check fails. So I think the best way to use this is, or the best way to show this is to do so by example. So let's take our create user function. Same function we had last time, or in the last 2 slides ago, and all of our messiness in it. So let's refactor the user does not equal null to bring that out into a guard clause. Simple as that. You have your user, or your check, user equals null this time, and if it does, you throw the same error. Okay, we can do the same with the is connected. Now we're checking if it's not connected, and we can do the same with the uniqueness check. So now suddenly the function is a lot easier to read. You can easily see where the user is, or where the checks are, what is required, and everything like that. And right at the bottom, you can see our function, or our actual core logic of this function, not the checks, is really easy to parse and find. So just simple formatting adjustments and a little bit of changes to the conditions, the code is much, much easier to read. So you might be saying you're not convinced. So let's talk about a couple other advantages. So first, as I mentioned earlier, the functions are easy to understand. So if we look at the core logic, it's right up here on line 5, but it's indented 3 times, and it's kind of hard to figure out at a glance. Versus in our new code, it's right at the bottom. It's super easy to find and super easy to check, oh, what does this actually do? So Another benefit of it is that this makes the function requirements transparent. Transparent. So when you go into a function, you'd like to know exactly how it works, or at least what you need to do to make it do what you expect. So for our function here, it's a lot easier to see that, this function will throw an error if the user equals null, because it's right at the top. If the database is not connected, we'll throw another error that's, database not connected. Or if the user, if the user already exists within the database, we'll just throw an error. So it's really quick and easy to figure out what exactly you need to pass into the function for it to work. Because if all these checks are satisfied, we'll just return, or we'll create the user and return. But if one or more of these, or if any one of these is, violated, the error will be thrown, and it's really quick and easy to figure out which error is thrown and where in the function that error was thrown from. So yeah, user, skip through that. So what you could say is that this establishes a contract for the function, which is dating back to a kind of archaic at this point philosophy of design by contract, where each function has a contract that if that contract is fulfilled, that the function will perform a almost deterministic running. It'll give you the exact answer that you're expecting given that the contract is filled. So another benefit though, and what I think is honestly the most important one, is the cleaner diffs. So as developers, we've all done code reviews, and we know that you can kind of get bogged down by just the mess of pluses and minuses within a Git diff, and you kind of lose what you're actually trying to review. So for example, our create user function without the guard clause, you can see the diff for this is a little bit complicated. It's not necessarily hard to parse, but it takes a little more time than you'd ideally like to spend, which is the minimum amount. So you see that our return statement's been deleted, well, technically indented, and we've added the new condition around it. So with a little bit of effort, you can see like, oh, okay, this is, they're adding a new condition. They've indented the create user a little bit, but it takes some time, a couple of seconds of mental effort to figure it out. Versus, let's take a look at the guard clause. So same condition, everything else is identical, but the guard clause only takes up 3 lines, and it's 3 additions. So if you're, going through a code review in GitHub or GitLab, and you can just look at this and see that, oh, they've added a condition. They're checking if the db.hasUser is, or if the database has this user. If it doesn't, or if it does, excuse me, we throw a new error. It's very simple to see where in the function is changed, and it's very simple to see what the changes were. Instead of trying to figure out, oh, is this a new indenting, or has some of the control flow changed, or something like that, you can just look and know exactly what's going on. You don't have to ask yourself a lot of the questions that you would typically do within a, or when you use this sort of indented structure. And one thing I would like to point out, even though I don't mention it explicitly in the slides, is indentation in these functions is a lot cleaner. So everything is on the top level except for what's contained within the guard clauses. So imagine if this, this call were something more complicated than just a single function call. Say you have to do a map over an array and transform the values within that array somehow. All that would be taking place right within this indented, 3 times indented function call, or if block, versus here, it's just right on the top level. You can find it, it's very simple to see, it's very easy to find. So a question you may ask is, when should you use else? And because as with anything in software engineering, it depends, or there's exceptions to the rules. So, it's pretty much on a case-by-case basis, but I'll give you some examples of ones that I have found, and I would appreciate it if anyone thinks that they have good examples to just raise your hand and we can talk about them. But some cases that I've found is like mathematical algorithms, so talking like leak code or something like that, you'll always need an else because you have a case 1, a case 2, or case 1, 2, 3, else if. And those cases are hard to avoid because sometimes it just dirties up the code if you're like trying to avoid it trying to avoid using else dogmatically. Alternatively, I find that non-essential logging So you can use like if something succeeds, log this, else log something else. Instead of throwing an error, just to to publish it to a external logging source or something along those lines. Those are the two main ones that I've come across in my professional experience, but does anyone else have any examples that they'd like to talk about? Yeah.
Sometimes we're with a ternary operator, and it's the, Hello? All right. Yeah, sometimes I'll break into an if-else statement if I've got a ternary operator, but the expressions in either part start to get a little more complicated than I want for one line. And then I might just do a let statement with an if-else, and then the if assign it to one and the else assign it to the other. And it helps sometimes with a really ugly ternary line. Mm-hmm. You can break it up into like simpler constructs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like a formatting thing, so people can actually like read your code. That makes a lot of sense. Anyone else? Nope.
All right, it's back on the link.
If I have like text that's personalized and then one line needs to be a generic statement just to make sure there's something there for non-personalized.
Oh, okay, so it's like a fallback almost, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I believe we had another one over here.
Somewhat similar to what he said. Well, I was thinking like typically fallback situations, but I guess more specifically, and I tend to think similarly about a switch statement where because sometimes those can get ugly and I'll try to avoid them and just handle it in a different way that is just cleaner to read. But if say like everything I'm doing is returning, that makes it a little cleaner in a switch because I don't have to remember to put a break. To go between.
Absolutely.
So it's a little similar, I guess, to like situations like that with an if-else. It's like, well, if I have a fallback condition that I want as kind of a catch-all and I'm not returning anything, then
Right.
maybe it makes sense.
Like using a default at the bottom to like, if it,
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah, because the return statement is really helpful when you have that within the if of like, oh, okay, this is what I'm wanting to return.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point too. Cool. Great. Yeah. So, that's all. Shameless plug about me. I have a blog where I did a blog post about this whole topic, and then you can find me on Twitter at Brenden Ehlers or LinkedIn at Brenden Ehlers. Cool. So, thanks for listening. Glad to have you. Any questions?
Any questions? Thought that was mic feedback. It's like a train or something. Yeah? Yeah.
Is it going? All right. Yeah, so my first question, have you used the Swift programming language?
No, I have not, but I've been meaning to learn it.
Well, all right. Well, your talk was great because it's great for other languages too. Because in Swift, there's like a statement called guard if, and so if you use an if statement with the guard keyword, it forces you to have an early return there, or there's an error.
Cool.
And I'd also like to say this is also a really good style for when you're working with TypeScript because you put the guard statements like user equals null and you have an early return, or you throw an error. Then everything below that TypeScript knows that that value can't possibly be null, and it helps give you the type hints and the type checking for all the code that you guarded against as well. So.
Yeah, no, that's what originally got me into this, was learning that like, oh, you can do that, and then you don't have to have the question mark dot syntax everywhere. So that's a really good point. I appreciate you bringing that up. We had another question over here, I believe.
Yeah, because I thought this was really good because it's very much something I try to do a lot of because, I don't know, especially on my team, I feel like I'm the king of using guard clauses. But one thing I just wanted your thoughts on, if you could elaborate more, is at least one thing I find that's a difficult, I guess, conflicting like thought process to navigate sometimes is like implicit versus explicit, denial or allowal. Like, like blacklisting versus whitelisting way of like, especially if I'm talking about like auth or something like that,
Yeah.
where that is typically more of a driver of I need to have explicit requirements that I'm checking and then and only then am I letting you through.
Right, yeah.
Because I have found situations like that, it can get a little tricky even sometimes, like if I get rid of the else, it can look, I don't know, just, it's hard to write it in a way that looks clean sometimes, at least for me.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. In my personal opinion, what I've always erred on the side of is if using an else statement makes it a lot easier to understand the code from a human perspective, you should definitely use it because at the end of the day, the compilers can read whatever you write,
Yeah.
but people who are going to be reading it are going to have a lot harder time figuring out exactly what you're wanting to do. So in a situation where using else, or like, yeah, using else makes the code easier to read, it's definitely better to use the else statement. And like I mentioned in the slide, it's not like this isn't a dogma you should take home, and do regardless of consequences or anything like that. It's just a general practice, I guess, that like most of the time not using else makes your code just easier to read, a little cleaner.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's always exceptions. And we as software engineers so often say, it depends. Cool. Any other questions? That's it. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, quick 2-minute break while we set up the next speaker. Grab the pizza. Please eat the pizza. Please, please, please. Gonna get started in 1 minute. 1 minute. Thirty seconds. 30 seconds. All right. Your next talk is Dev Scrimmage, When It's Time to Practice the Whole Job by Marlena Baker. Please give it up.
Hello, and thanks for coming, everyone. As CJ said, I'm going to be talking about Dev Scrimmages, which might be a little confusing up front, but I'm sure will make sense by the end. But first I want to talk about myself, because I love talking about myself. I'm Marlena. I'm a full stack developer and a bunch of other stuff, because I'm a complex human being like everyone else, but here's the highlights. I'm an educator and a mentor. I was a project manager in a former life, and still am a project manager, I discovered, but developers have to do that shit. I was a designer in a previous life, and still kind of am that too. I'm a UX enthusiast because I want people to be able to use and find my tools useful. On that note, I'm an accessibility advocate, a DEI advocate. Outside of work, I'm a fiber artist. I love to knit, I love to weave, beading, embroidery. And I'm a hobby collector, if that wasn't obvious. I'm also a cat and snake mom. I have pictures, talk to me after the talk. And I'm a gamer, which I will not discuss because I will not stop talking about it if I do. So, today we're going to talk about how you would know how to identify that it's time to scrimmage, creating a plan for your scrimmage. We're going to actually start a little scrimmage, and then we're going to talk about reflecting on your scrimmage, which is really the whole point. But what's a scrimmage, especially for us? That's that jock stuff, right? Well, the Oxford Dictionary does define it as a session in which teams practice by playing simulated games, which isn't quite what we do, but it's not far off. So this is something that I've actually been doing for years and am just now codifying into coherent words for y'all. And I discovered that Doug Lemov in Practice Perfect actually summed it up really nicely. A scrimmage is an evaluation. You're not practicing the skill. You're determining if the skill is ready for real application. And thus, a scrimmage needs to replicate the complexity and uncertainty of the game or the job. And so that's what I want you to hold in your mind as we go forward. If you remember nothing else, because that was a whole lot of words, evaluation, that's your keyword. Don't worry, I'll bring it up a lot. So, when is it time to scrimmage? You may be ready for a scrimmage if you have no idea what you want to learn next. If you're in that weird state where you've learned a lot of things and you know you don't know things, but you're not quite sure what you don't know, and you're not quite sure what's going to have the most impact on your growth as a developer, it's a great time to have a scrimmage. If you're preparing to join a new company or a team and you're anxious about whether you're going to do a good job, embarrass yourself on the first day, it's a great time to scrimmage. And if you're working towards a new role within your company, that's also a great time. With a little note that in that case, a lot of companies will provide you this beautiful rubric for what it means to go on to the next role called a career ladder or a career matrix. I have complex feelings about them. I think they're a great tool. I think they're applied badly. But if you have a rubric, you might as well use it when you're evaluating yourself with a scrimmage. All right, so you've decided you want to do a scrimmage. Now you got to make a plan. I love a plan. Step 1, be clear about your goals. As with most things in life, knowing what you want to do will help you do it. You want to ensure that your scrimmage is going to help you measure what you need to measure, because it's an evaluation. What are you trying to learn from doing a scrimmage? By knowing this, you can set parameters around your scrimmage as you go forward in planning that will help you actually see the things you want to measure. It's a lot like setting your metrics for anything, honestly. A new feature, performance of an application, things like that. If you want to measure it right, you have to know what you care about. Some examples. I mentioned going for a new role, so evaluate if you think you're ready to move up to a mid and start really pushing for that promotion. You want to know if you can just build an app from scratch and get it deployed. 0 to 100, can you do it? If you want to examine how your project management practices work, you can hone in on just that through your scrimmage, or even more fine, what's the word I'm looking for? Granular. Granular is the word. You can put an emphasis on following coding standards and looking for weak points in how you write your code, like do you use too many else statements? And of course, you can decide what your next technical learning focus is going to be. So those are some good goals, but it's going to be different for everyone. Step 2, determine your finish line. The last thing you want to do is go into this and not have any clue when you're going to stop, because that's a great way to never get to actually measure it. Finish line, it's going to be based on the goals that you set. It's going to be based on how far you want to take the project that will be the center of our scrimmage. It's going to be informed by what steps of the process you're looking to replicate and evaluate your skill with. And how long do you want to spend on the scrimmage? Because as much as I would love to do this in a vacuum where we could write code for fun all day, we don't. We got to go live our lives at some point, right? So maybe you want to get your app deploy ready. Maybe you want to have a real Git history that you would see at work. Maybe you want to practice documenting your app and see how you do with documentation. Maybe you want it to be fully tested. Or maybe you don't care about any of that, and as long as the code is working, you've captured what you need. Those are all great endpoints for a scrimmage. Step 3, you got to actually pick something that you're going to work on, because the job is in the end coding. I know, I make it sound like it's not, but it is. You want a project that fits the parameters that you set. You need it to be complex enough to support any additional skills that you're including in your scrimmage. And you want to include some uncertainty. So going back to our definition, a scrimmage needs to simulate the complexity and uncertainty of the real job. So don't pick something, it might be tempting, I know, that you're 100% sure you can do right. You want to see how you handle a rough situation in your scrimmage. You don't want to just fly through it, because what are you learning then, right? It's a difficult balance to hit, obviously, all these different things, but I promise that scrimmages are a thing you can practice too. Practice on practice on practice on practice. Anyways, some examples. You might have a tutorial or practice project online that you want to follow. You might have a personal project in mind already. I'm slowly building a gardening app by scrimmaging each feature. I come back to it and I'm like, oh wow, this code is terrible. I've learned so much. Let's see what I've learned now. You might make a clone of an existing app. I've definitely built a Reddit clone in the past to see how I do with my coding as I approach something more complex than just an example online. If you don't have anything in your back pocket, you go to Google. There's a dozen, probably more than a dozen out there that you can use to center your scrimmage around. All right, step 4, it's time to set up the playing field. We're getting close. You want to prep so that once you start working, you can keep working. And you can start exactly where you want to start evaluating yourself. Sorry, I need a sip of water. We're doing great on time, folks. Am I talking too fast? Nice. Glad to hear it. All right. You want to prep so that you can start exactly where you want to start to evaluate. That means that you might need to make decisions that would have already been made in the real job. That might be business requirements. That might be technical standards. If you want to practice being on a team, your team has standards before you sit down and write that new feature. So you're not going to be coming up with those standards on the fly. So you need to set up your space, your mise en place, to jump in as if you were doing the job for real. Your aim is to not have to stop in the middle for additional setup because that will just muddy the waters. We want something real clear cut if we're going to have a good result. So that might mean doing the file setup, having a project already started before you start your scrimmage proper. Get your libraries installed, write a few user stories for that project that you found on Medium, write some acceptance criteria, grab some designs, maybe pick a style guide and some architectural patterns that you want to follow in order to scrimmage appropriately. And that might sound like a lot of work just to get to the actual thing, but consider external sources. What do you need to flesh out your preparations for your scrimmage? Keep it minimal as you can, and take shortcuts where the details don't matter. So if you just want to see if you can write an app from 0 to 100, 100, I know there's no done state. Maybe you don't care what style guide. You're just going to grab Airbnb. You're just going to do ESLint default. Maybe you don't actually care what it looks like. You're just going to go grab a screen cap of a similar site and use that as your mock. Because what is a mock but a representation of the finished product? So go steal someone else's work. I mean borrow. No. There's defaults and shortcuts everywhere. If you're building a front-end app and you need some data for what you want to practice, go find an API that's open to use. Google Images for mocks and wireframes. Bootstrap can be your design standard for your application. Maybe it's just what Bootstrap does by default because you're not concerned about that piece. So shortcut everywhere you can so that you can get to your scrimmage faster. All right, let's do a little example. And boy, I have talked fast. I'm glad it hasn't sounded fast, but man, I'm ahead of schedule. And that's great because I've just got code I can write for you for the rest of the time. Aren't you excited? All right, so for this example scrimmage, goals. I want to put together skills I've got practice in. Project management, user experience, Git practices, deployment. Those are the ones that I'm most concerned about, and I want to see how they all fit together into a finished product. I'm the finished product, the developer. But I also want to build a front-end feature and deploy it successfully. And I want to gain insight into areas where I need work to be a great developer. So I'm going to make a I'm going to deploy an application that meets the requirements, and I want to finish it in a weekend. Now, I didn't want to do all of that setup, so I found, well, I didn't find. Some of you may know that I'm working with Curricular on some assessment writing. This is not the assessment product. We've released free practice projects, and when I saw them, I was immediately reminded of this practice of mine of scrimmaging. It comes with user stories and acceptance criteria and Figma files and everything. So this is like an ideal project for this kind of scrimmage. That's my entire plug for Curricular. And they're free. So we're going to do this event card project as our little example here. So to set up, I know I want a project scaffold because I'm just looking to build a feature. For team standards, we're going to do mobile first. We're going to use the ESLint and prettier defaults. The business requirements come from the project. The assets come from the project. So do some starter styles and starter HTML. I know I need a project management tool because I want to evaluate my project management skills, see if I'm still good at it. I'm going to need a front-end framework. I've decided Vue because I always wanted an excuse to work in Vue. And somewhere to deploy it. I did set up Netlify just in case, but this is supposed to be like a 2-hour project. We'll see what we do. Oh yeah, so let's start our project. So as far as a project management tool goes, Trello, is that tiny? It's tiny. How's that? Yeah, Trello is kind of my go-to for it's simple, I don't want to pay for it, and it, can give me some cards in an order in columns, which it, it does. I'm sad to say there's I feel like project management tools as a rule are getting more complex. So I love when things stay simple. All right, so we're going to grab our user stories because that's our business requirements, and we're going to turn each one into a card. Riveting, I know. I'll be quick, I promise. All right, so we've got our cards. Yes, Trello, are you okay? When I'm doing this for myself, I'm going to use my garden app as kind of a this is what I do. Everyone's going to have their own thing. Maybe because I have such a background in project management, always want to know what I'm doing and where it's at. And it's also because I kind of stop and start it all the time. So this kind of stuff not only gives me that opportunity to see how I'm doing at my job, but sets up some useful tools for me. So as a user, I want to see key details of each event organized neatly on a card so I can quickly decide which events are of interest. I've grabbed the acceptance criteria, and I really care about the dynamic content and the card design. I cheated, I read these ahead of time, looked at the test. We'll be dealing with responsiveness at another point. So we've got some acceptance criteria for that one. Another thing that I can, I'm not going to overcomplicate it. Okay. As a user, I expect all interactive elements like buttons to have distinct hover and focus states, providing a smooth navigation experience. So I'm going to go from my acceptance criteria. We're going to go for interactivity. We're going to keep card design because it's kind of running through the whole thing is that don't break the things you already did, right? And then I'm going to throw responsiveness into, as a user, I want the event card to automatically adjust to my device's screen size, ensuring a consistent and comfortable viewing experience across all devices. Now, if I really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty, I might groom this, I might give it some technical details. Estimation, I do recommend that you practice estimating how long tickets are going to take you because it is a difficult skill. And it's all kind of relative and weird, and when you're on a team, it gets even more complicated. So when you get the chance to give it a go and see how you do at guessing how long a task will take you, you should take it. So for example, I'm gonna say, all right, let's see. I have 10 minutes left before I want to take questions. So do we think we can get the cards on the page in 7 minutes? We'll see. We'll see. Taking me to my prepped project, my prepped view project. So here's what we have from what I was given in the project setup. And this is where I would want to be on my own anyways, if my scrimmage is building the card component as a ticket that I would get at work, right? So I've gotten to the point where I'm ready to put the card on the page. I have a way to validate my work. I have a way to build it that feels natural and real, but I haven't actually done it yet. So we're going to take our card and drop it in progress. Key details of each event organized. All right. So what does that mean we need to do? Well, we've got our app.view with our starter code, and the events are going to go here. We know we're building a component, right? So we're going to come into components and create a new, we're going to do event card.view. We'll drop our script, setup. Yeah, I know you're mad at me. Template requires child element. Trust me, we're getting there. I'm not going to worry about styling it quite yet because we're doing dynamic content. And for that, we're going to import our data. Mock. Nope. Oh. // mock data.json. I don't think that's right. Because I'm playing the game and I'm trying to make it real, but I did not set it up an API. And that's okay because I'm not practicing fetching data. I'm practicing making a great UX. Well, this is how I'm like, shortcuts, all the shortcuts. We'll see if that works in a minute, because you know what we do when we don't know if our code works? We run it. All right, so I want the card to be an article. And for now, I just want, we'll give it an H2, and we want, V4. Event in data. Event dot, let's take a peek. Event name is kind of a terrible key. Date time, but we're going to use it because it should be a unique string. Is that right? Yeah, okay. And then we're gonna event name. I don't know, let's see if we've pulled in our data properly at least. Oh, wait, we're not loading it on the page. We're going to be bringing in event card here. Oh, and I've made a mistake. Does anybody know what my mistake is? What was that? Oh, it's not the primary mistake I've made. CJ.
Two mistakes.
Okay, give me them.
First of all, it should be data.events, but you want that for in the parent component, not in this component.
Correct. Yeah, I jumped straight into my V4 like an excited child. I miss Vue. Okay, anyways. So yeah, we're going to be doing all this up here. And now, there is that. Okay. Yep. And, whoop. Okay. And then this card probably needs some props. Where are we at? I'm going to be on the safe side because I want lots of time for questions. Ooh, that's not safe. No open containers near the computer. All right. This is me jumping into my coding. And now we have to play pretend. We have to play pretend that I finished my project and I got it deployed and it's time to reflect on the performance. I hope that there was an opportunity for you to see wanting to put the pieces together with Trello, with Netlify, with my code, having user stories and trying to react to those user stories in an appropriate order. I never even got around to like committing something. One of these days. Anyways, revisit your goals. At the end of your scrimmage, you've done what you set out to do, hopefully. You have to stop and remember, what were you trying to learn about your work, about what you do? You need to focus on the process as well as the outcome. This isn't dissimilar from like a retro at work if you're practicing agile, but is very self-reflective rather than team reflective. But you want to review the good as well as the bad because you want to know what your strengths are. That's really valuable information. And if something became clear to you outside of those goals that you set, don't ignore it just because you set those goals. Anything you can learn about yourself and your work and how you work best is going to be of benefit to you. So, what was I trying to learn about my work? I wanted to put together skills I've got practice in. Project management, user experience, Git practices, deployment, yada yada. I wanted to make sure I could build a feature and deploy it. And I wanted to gain insight into areas where I need work to be a great developer. So, in that case, I might ask, am I satisfied with how my skills came together? What were the friction points in the process? Where did I feel like things were a lot more difficult than they needed to be? And what would I have done differently if I were to go back and do the exact same scrimmage all over again? As far as completing a project, did I succeed? Not today, but eventually. Am I satisfied with the outcome? Do I think that I did a good job? Did I stall out anywhere? How did I handle blockers? That's a really key one, is like when things go wrong, when you get to that unpredictability, How do you handle it? It's important to know how you do and how you can do so better. And then areas for improvement. What gave me the most difficulty? Which skill was I the strongest with? What practices had the most impact on my work? And that's, I think, kind of overlooked, is like, am I good or bad at something is one thing, but how does this actually impact what I do is a really important question to ask in a lot of situations. So these are just some ideas based on this example that I contrived desperately. But you might have different questions that you want to ask yourself and different areas of importance within how you want to measure yourself as a developer. So we talked about how to identify when it's time to scrimmage. We talked about creating a plan for your scrimmage. We kind of ran a scrimmage, real softly. And we talked about reflecting on your scrimmage. Hopefully you've got some ideas that you can percolate on as you go forward and grow as developers yourself. But I'm sure I left lots out because I'm just this here human being. So what questions do you have for me?
Hello. This is kind of random thoughts, a little bit haphazard. Don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I'll push back a little bit, and maybe you can give me some advice. This is a very top-down approach to designing software. Think about how the screens look, what are the components, how do you tackle each one, how does it respond correctly. In a lot of situations I work in, it's extremely chaotic. Mm-hmm. So chaotic you don't have any requirements. So you're waiting for the design department, they'll get back to you. You're waiting for product management and they get back to you, but you've still got to be developing. So it's very much a bottom-up approach to designing software. Some of these really good ideas that you're saying about how to design software, how do you address those types of scenarios?
Sure.
If you can.
Sure. So if I was in that situation and felt like I wanted to evaluate how I'm handling this chaotic situation, or I wanted to introduce that extra element of chaos, it would be in the prep work. Have the things that would appear at the wrong time at the ready, and it'll come in at this point. After 4 hours, I have access to the designs I set aside. Or have a friend send them to you at a random time in the day. Use ways like that. And you can definitely lean on other people to help make this happen, to add some extra unpredictability to the situation, if that's the situation you want to practice and to evaluate yourself in. Does that help?
Yeah, it's just not a really good position to ever do development, so I don't know
no,
if
no,
you really want to
I
practice
agree.
that, but yeah.
But we've got to be realistic about the situation we're in, unfortunately. Like, if that's where you are, that's what you've got to learn to deal with, and I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Am I good?
Yeah.
Cool.
One more time. Present.
Oh, don't hold it.
If you hold it.
Hello? Okay, no holding. Have you ever tried to inject a coach into this process?
Kind of. I would say, like, not, it's not dissimilar from how I learned to code. Like, there's some people in the room who are going to be like, oh yeah, you're a galvanized kid. But since I left that, I haven't like sought out someone to help in this way. I have used some of these principles when mentoring others. So I guess, yes, on the coach side. Does that help? Oh.
I kind of just want to add to that because, I mean, to me, it just seems like a great way to get help from your mentor who otherwise doesn't have structure, right? Because a lot of times some mentors maybe don't know how best they can help. But if you bring this to them and say, hey, I'm trying to pretend like I'm working on a project here, so can you pretend to be my product manager? Or like earlier, like, can you pretend to send me the design 4 hours later or something like that? But it does seem like this framework could work with other people involved, like maybe even other peers, like if you want to scrimmage working on a team or something like that. So yeah, it's getting my gears turning of just like providing structure where there otherwise isn't, so you can actually measure the outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely thought about like group project style scrimmage. I just wasn't sure how available that was to a lot of people, so I didn't want to dig into that during this talk, but it's an absolutely great use. And if you work at the kind of company that does like a hack week or a hack day, like that's a great time to say like, let's sit down and play this like it's real. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think it'd be okay to take something real you're actually trying to do, like the actual work, and apply this framework to some segment of that? Maybe repeatedly, continuously just evaluating different ways of going about things?
Yeah. I think you're describing agile, but no. But yeah, like for like a personal project, like my gardening app that I will build someday, or like will reach MVP someday, because it's a great time for me to practice when I've got a complex problem like that. And so yeah, I think that's perfectly valid way to like say, I'm going to work like I'm on a team even though I'm alone, and use that to grow both my app and myself. Does that? Cool. Anything else?
Where can we find your slides so we can follow these wonderful guidelines?
They will be up on my marlenabaker.works within the week because I'm still redesigning it.
Okay.
I may have completely decided on a new concept for my portfolio site while I was working on this talk. I didn't have time to get it out there, but within the week you'll find it at marlenabaker.works. What else?
Time for one more if you got it.
Yeah, you just mentioned giving yourself like a weekend to work on a scrimmage. And I just thought like it's hard to get like a lot done in a weekend, like
Yeah.
especially like end to end if you're like gonna like build the app and deploy it. I guess just a question. I mean, I guess you can take as long as you want, but I mean, should you limit it to like a weekend and just try to like time box yourself, or?
I think there's definitely benefit in time boxing it, or else it can kind of get away from you.
Okay.
But if a weekend is not like going to be a reasonable amount of time for you to build it in, maybe it's like within 2 weeks I'd like to have this built and deployed. And I'm going to work it around all the other things I have going on in my life, but that's just how life is. I think it'll really be down to the person, like what time frame makes sense based on what their schedule and what their life looks like. So weekend was just an example because I don't have weekends either, to be perfectly honest. I am always busy. Yeah, so it'll be real, like, you know yourself best, and even though you're trying to get to know yourself better, And there's a learning in, I gave myself 2 weeks and it didn't get done. What happened, right? You still have that opportunity to reflect on why was that estimation of what it would take to do the scrimmage, like what went wrong? And maybe it was just life, and that does happen. But yeah, the weekend was just an example.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Sweet. That's another DenverScript. Thanks for coming, everyone. Who's here was your first time? Wow. Who's coming back next time? Sweet. So next month, it's not on meetup.com yet, but it'll be there soon. Be sure to RSVP. Right now, the main talk will be an introduction to Docker with Brooks, who is here. He's here, yeah. So Brooks is going to be giving a talk next month. And we're still looking for either a lightning talk or a short talk. So if you'd like to talk next month, denverscript.com to submit. Ched, do we have any leftover pizza that we want to give away? Cool. So if you want food, please take it home. We need to be out of here by like 8:10, so feel free to mingle a little bit. Thank you for coming.